We kick off the story right in the middle of some insane action. A massive dragon is looming over a group of adventurers who dared to challenge it. With a single sweep of its tail, the beast crushes the battlefield, threatening to turn anyone in its path into barbecue. Wielding two swords, a fierce warrior lands a blow right on the creature's snout. Next up, an adventurer unleashes a bolt of lightning magic from his blade. The dragon counters with a freezing spell shot straight toward the group. But a human sorceress quickly conjures a magical shield that protects her allies from harm. The pressure, however, is so intense that the barrier shatters, leaving the adventurers exposed. When the healer gets injured, one of her companions quickly shoves a potion down her throat, bringing her back into the fight. Taking advantage of the chaos, a cunning man uses a sly maneuver to slash the dragon's eye, sending the beast into a blind rage. The dual-bladed warrior uses her agility to deflect the crackling red beams away from her teammates, while the frontline fighter barks at his allies not to lose heart. After all, they are the Silver Wing, the strongest party in the world. The scene cuts to a round table crowded with high-level adventurers gathered for an emergency meeting. The drama starts right away with Vigo, level 99, pointing the finger at Dennis for their latest failed mission, blaming him for using the voice of dread, which supposedly scared off the cave dragon and cost them the victory. Dennis fires back, reminding everyone it was Captain Vigo himself who ordered him to use that ability. The leader, of course, denies it flat out. Frustrated, Dennis flashes back to the battle. Their mission was to defeat the cave dragon and recover its rare materials, but when the beast went berserk, winning became impossible. That's when the captain demanded Dennis use the voice of dread, and with that burst of intimidation, the cave dragon panicked and ran. The mission was a bust. Even so, Dennis knows that if they'd pressed on, plenty of them would have died. Still, Vigo insists he'd never give such an order and accuses Dennis of plotting to smear the group's reputation, like he's some kind of spy from a rival team. With that bullshit suspicion, the captain condemns Dennis to expulsion. Seeing that none of his other teammates speak up, Dennis realizes they all agree. Vigo sneers that a mere cook like Dennis never deserved to be in the group anyway. And that's enough to make Dennis rise from his seat and unleash a surge of power in front of the leader. Vigo doesn't back down. In his mind, Silver Wing is only for the most qualified warriors, and even if Dennis is level 99, he's still just a cook. So, with all that said, Dennis backs off, accepts his expulsion, and leaves without another word. A few days later, Dennis is packing up to leave the capital when a little girl bumps into him and accidentally lets go of her balloon. She's crushed. It was a gift from her mother. So Dennis leaps up onto the fountain obelisk in the square, grabs the balloon, returning it to her and lighting up her world, before watching her run back to her mom. He tells her, "If something matters to you, don't let it slip away so easily." Watching his former teammate from a high window, Vigo decides it's finally time to set his plan into motion. Back to Dennis as he's leaving through the city gates. He's stopped by a former party member, Katie, the dual-bladed warrior. She rushes after him, desperate to understand why he was kicked out. According to her, if Dennis leaves, nobody will be able to make those secret potions or whip up the delicious food only he knows how to cook. Dennis shrugs it off, insisting they'll find someone better. But Katie is adamant. Since Dennis joined, their dungeon runs have skyrocketed in efficiency. And that's the real reason Silver Wing now sits atop the adventurer rankings. It's not his fault the others don't recognize what he brings to the table. And if he insists on leaving for good, she at least wants him to cook dinner and prep some meals to tide them over. Dennis complains that all she thinks about is food, but Katie grows serious and asks what he'll do next. He says he's opening a restaurant. He's finally going to cook for real. Katie's crushed. After all, she was the one who invited Dennis to join Silver Wing in the first place, and he thanks her for that. Thinking to himself, Dennis knows he and Katie have always gotten along. Vigo, on the other hand, is clearly interested in her, and that probably influenced his decision to get rid of the cook. As a last-ditch effort, the vice captain orders Dennis to return to the team right now. But even without a response, Dennis knows his adventuring days are over. On the bright side, his new life as a chef is just beginning. Without wasting time, he heads to another city and is instantly captivated by a state-of-the-art refrigerator in the marketplace, an absolute must-have for any real restaurant. He's dying to take it home, but first checks his guide for ex-adventurers on how to open a restaurant, making sure it's really a necessary expense. According to the book, the best approach is to minimize costs wherever possible. That convinces Dennis to skip the purchase for now and rely on his ice magic instead. Leaving the shop, the would-be entrepreneur decides to follow his guide step by step, getting pumped about launching his new business. Circling the marketplace, he keeps these tips in mind. Buy a cheap, abandoned building and renovate it. Build good relationships with your suppliers. After a long afternoon of shopping and research, Dennis can feel his dream coming alive, getting closer by the minute. He's almost ready, but reading a little further in the guide, he realizes doing everything alone is crucial, but customers matter just as much. So Dennis decides it's time to hire someone. In the middle of all this, he notices a man out on the street, drawing a crowd as he boasts about his hand-picked goods of unparalleled quality. But the star attraction is a little girl who, according to the merchant, was once the daughter of a great noble house. Her parents had lost a power struggle and been cast out. Some in the crowd wonder if the girl is truly a noble, or if that's just the merchant's ploy to drive up her price. Dennis, for his part, could only think how much he wished he could help her. But he couldn't save everyone. If he tried to right every injustice in the world, he surely wouldn't survive. It's messed up, but it's the truth. Suddenly, the girl meets the cook's eyes, and in that look, he's transported back to his own childhood, when he wandered the streets alone and abandoned. An opening bid of 300,000 piece kicks off the auction, but the price rises fast, shooting up to 800,000 in no time. The merchant is about to close the deal when Dennis speaks up, offering 1 million. But then the refrigerator vendor butts in, raising the bid to 1.5 million. He's desperate to take this cute little girl home and take good care of her. People around them whisper in concern. The vendor has offered so much for the girl, and everyone knows he's a depraved creep. God only knows what he'd do to an innocent child. Not wanting to give up, Dennis offers 2 million, but the creep counters with 3. The bidding war spirals higher and higher, seeming to have no end, until, cut to the next scene, Dennis manages to buy the girl, trading away almost every coin he had. Still, he can't have the girl wandering around in rags, so he takes her to a shop and buys her a dress that, according to the shopkeeper, matches her hair perfectly. Later that afternoon, the two of them are walking side by side down the street. Suddenly, the girl stops in her tracks and stands still for several seconds, ignoring Dennis's calls. Without a word, she starts walking again, leaving Dennis completely at a loss for what to do with this child. As she shuffles along, head down, the girl suddenly looks up and realizes she's lost sight of her new master. In a flash, she's nearly run over by a passing cart and bumps into a rough-looking man. Moments later, she does the same to an elderly lady who snaps at her with open disdain. Each encounter makes the child feel as if she's trapped in a living nightmare surrounded by hostile strangers, a helpless creature among wolves. That's when Dennis finds her and confesses how worried he was, apologizing for walking too fast. Back at the house Dennis had just purchased, the girl asks why he bought her. Dennis scratches his head, explaining that she reminded him of something from long ago. He asks what he should call her and she replies, slave. Not liking that one bit, Dennis insists on calling her Atelier. He introduces himself, full of enthusiasm. She asks what she's supposed to do, and Dennis tells her she doesn't have to do anything. She can use the upstairs however she likes, or she's free to leave if she wants. After all, from this moment on, she's a free person. Later, the cook does what he does best, prepares a meal fit for his new housemate. While he's working in the kitchen, the girl remains quiet and withdrawn. Besides being a talented cook, Dennis also uses a bit of magic to enhance the meal, giving it a special touch. It's this bit of magic that finally makes Atelier's eyes light up for the first time since she arrived. The aroma is so enchanting she feels like she's floating on air. When she opens her eyes again, a beautiful plate of food sits before her. Dennis sits beside her, and the two of them give thanks for the meal. The girl takes her first bite and instantly falls in love with the flavor, eating as if she can't get enough. Once she's stuffed, Atelier suddenly bursts into tears. Watching her, Dennis realizes he can't imagine what this girl has been through. He decides not to push her with any questions. If she wants to talk, she will. Even if she's been hurt so deeply she thinks there's no hope left in the world, at least she'll have food to eat here. At one point, Dennis asks if Atelier liked the food, and she realizes she's got a mountain of rice stuck in her throat, prompting Dennis to come to her rescue once again. Over the next few days, Atelier gets used to the rhythms of daily life, pitching in around the house with cleaning and chores. Before long, she and Dennis are inseparable, sharing every little moment. One day, after finally finishing the restaurant sign, Dennis celebrates with a fist bump. Atelier hesitates, but when she finally returns the gesture, she feels, for the first time, a sense of belonging and camaraderie with this young man who's done so much for her. And so, at last, the adventurer's restaurant opens its doors, and Dennis wants Atelier to be the poster girl for the place. With everything decided, the owner takes one last look around. The menu's ready, the water's out, tables and chairs are set, the ingredients and kitchen tools are all in their place, everything's perfect. Nothing can stop this venture now. Fired up, Dennis promises himself that the very first customer will fall in love with his cooking, so much that they'll need to eat there 3 times a day. Well, as long as they pay, of course. Because our boy Dennis is dead broke and can't afford to give anyone free meals. Finally, the restaurant door swings open, and a knight in full armor stands silently in the entrance. Recalling page 68 of his guide, Dennis remembered that some customers just want to be left alone, preferring not to be bothered. So, even if this guy was armed to the teeth, the chef had to keep a friendly distance so as not to make things awkward. As the customer took a seat at the counter, the restaurant owner asked Atelier to fetch a glass of water. Dennis, keeping a close eye on the man, waited eagerly to see what he'd order. After all, this was his very first customer, and it had to be special. Instead of speaking, the customer simply pointed to a small portion of rice and a side of crystallized pickled plums on the menu. Honestly, Dennis was a bit let down. He'd imagined a warrior like this would go for a hearty meal to recover from some epic battle. Thinking out loud, he asked if the customer was the type to eat like a bird, and the guy shook his head. Dennis then asked if he was short on cash, and the warrior's reaction made it clear that was exactly the case. So, Dennis decided to ignore the order and whipped up a massive bowl of stew, wanting to treat his first customer right. Quickly, the customer made it clear in a distinctly feminine voice that she couldn't pay for the meal. That's when Dennis realized his customer was actually a woman. At that point, she had nothing left to hide. She took off her helmet and revealed who she really was. She explained, somewhat dejectedly, that she'd been kicked out of her adventuring party just for being a girl. A cruel twist, considering gender shouldn't matter when it comes to skill in battle. What a bunch of jerks. Her level wasn't that high, but probably around 23, which was respectable enough. Dennis agreed about the gender issue and thought she was mature enough at that level anyway. All fired up, the adventurer, Henrietta, went on about the vice captain of the strongest group out there, the Silver Wing, a female swordswoman known as Crimson Lightning, whose opening attack was always a critical hit. Clearly, a legendary warrior in her own right. Dennis knew all about her. He even muttered under his breath that she could be pretty ruthless sometimes. Not catching what he said, the adventurer explained that she was hiding her gender to get into another party, but it was tough, since she couldn't even speak without giving herself away. Things had gotten tight. She was running out of money and losing hope. Seeing this, Dennis set down the very first meal for his very first customer, hoping to lift her spirits. The girl was mesmerized by the dish's mouth-watering appearance. She reminded him she couldn't pay, but Dennis waved it off, telling her to eat before it got cold. With that, she dug in, and with every bite she seemed transported. When she finally finished, Dennis, delighted with how happy she looked, invited her to come back anytime. But as she'd already said, she couldn't afford daily meals at a restaurant. So Dennis made her a promise. He'd spread the word that a female swordswoman was looking for a team, and in the meantime, she could eat there for free until she found a job. The offer left her speechless. After serving his very first customer, word got out, and more people started coming and falling in love with Dennis's cooking. Whether it was his fried rice or the wyvern pasta, they said the food was top-notch, and the poster girl was the cutest thing ever. Dennis laughed and told Atelier people were praising her, but she just stayed quiet, as if none of it concerned her, a reminder that her past had made her a lot tougher. Even an elderly couple praised her service, but Atelier still didn't know how to respond. When one of the men's group remarked that this was the perfect meal before heading off to a dungeon, Dennis realized they were adventurers too. He asked if they'd be interested in adding a female swordswoman to their team. One of them said she could join them the very next day. They were actually looking for someone with more firepower. Later that afternoon, when the girl returned to the restaurant, she was amazed that Dennis had found her a new party so quickly. She promised she'd pay him back every cent from her first paycheck, even though he'd arranged it. Dennis told her to be careful. He didn't know those guys, but she was too excited to worry. Soon after, Dennis finished preparing her basilisk oyakodon, and she polished off the plate in no time, vowing with her mouth still full to pay him back for every last bite of that divine meal. Dennis asked her not to talk with her mouth full, so she mumbled, with her mouth still full, how delicious the food was. After her meal, Dennis's first customer left, but she definitely wasn't the last. As the days went by, more and more people discovered Dennis's restaurant. One night, after closing, two girls stopped by and were just as captivated by the food. As he was getting ready to close up, Dennis asked Atelier to go fetch the store curtain. Meanwhile, listening in, Dennis overheard the blonde girl telling her friend that lately, some adventuring groups had been inviting women to join them only to do terrible things to them deep in dungeons. They'd take the women so far in that they couldn't find their way back, then abandon them after assaulting them. After pulling this a few times, these adventurers would move on to another city and repeat the cycle. Hearing all this, Dennis wondered if those criminals might have been the guys who came to his restaurant. The next day, Henrietta introduced herself to her new teammates. Across from her stood a brown-haired guy named Still, a light swordsman. To her right was Marmok, the healer. The red-haired archer was Hondok, and the hooded mage was Kalatoba. Technically, Still was the leader, but Henrietta could just relax. Soon enough, the group heads out on their first mission. Still says today's job will just be a simple gathering run. Henrietta asks what they'll be collecting, but the leader says they'll talk about it once they get there. With an awkward smile, she thinks to herself that she really just wanted to know beforehand, but she keeps quiet. Once inside the cave, Henrietta quickly proves she's anything but ordinary. With every enemy that appears, she takes them down in a new and creative way. Her teammates watch in awe, clapping and praising her performance, words that go straight to her head after how she was kicked out of her last group. Still, they say it's time to go even deeper, and for the first time, Henrietta feels like people are genuinely counting on her. After all, she's always been treated as the weak link just for being a woman. Now that things are different, Henrietta swears she'll give it everything she's got. The party presses on, delving into the most dangerous parts of the dungeon, until a silver golem appears. Henrietta doesn't hesitate, meeting it head-on and slicing off one of its arms in a single strike. Next, they face a massive worm, and Henrietta makes quick work of it, taking off its head without breaking a sweat. With each new stage, she becomes more and more determined. But all that drive eventually comes with a price. After so much fighting, Henrietta is finally exhausted. Even then, her teammates barely seem to notice, insisting they're almost at their destination. Left with no choice, she pushes herself onward. Finally, they reach a certain part of the labyrinth. Still explains that the glowing crystals scattered around are memory crystals, and that's what they came to collect. Henrietta, barely hanging on, nearly collapses. The leader tells Marmok to cast a healing spell on her. Instead, Marmok casts a spell that restricts her movements even more. Struggling, Henrietta tries to grab her sword, but Still steps on her hand and kicks it away. Now, with her body reeling from the stun effect, Henrietta is easy prey. Planting his foot on her, the team leader mocks how easy she was to fool. According to him, swordswomen are always the best targets. They're not as clever as mages and usually have the nicest bodies. The plan is to have their fun with her for an hour, then let her go. Just pure scum. Hearing all this, Henrietta can only regret not listening to Dennis. If she just paid more attention, she would have known something was wrong from the start. With that, the criminals start removing her armor, but suddenly, the sound of battle echoes through the cave. They panic. Still tells Handok to check it out, but the archer is immediately knocked aside by a blow that sends him flying. The source of the chaos steps forward, wearing a bag over their head and wielding 2 kitchen knives. The sheer fury makes the adventurers think a monster has come for them. Quickly, Still orders Marmok to use a detection spell, but it's useless against such a terrifying opponent. In a flash, the stranger attacks Still, hurling him against the cave wall with bone-crushing force as Henrietta lies helpless. The masked figure absolutely wrecks the criminals. Watching through blurry eyes, Henrietta thinks the person moves just like a master chef, but she passes out before she can make sense of it all. In the next scene, Henrietta recounts what happened. When she woke up, she was at the Adventurers Guild, unable to thank the mysterious, muscular man with the kitchen knives. Her attackers had been knocked out, tied up, and left at the dungeon's entrance. The guild investigated and found out they were wanted criminals. After all she's been through, it almost feels like a bad dream. Still, it's clear she needs to be much more careful about who she adventures with. Dennis, meanwhile, says it was his fault too, much to her surprise. In his view, he should have done some background checks. Embarrassed, Henrietta insists it wasn't his fault, until her stomach lets out a loud growl. Dennis asks what she wants for dinner. She remembers she's still broke, but as always, the chef doesn't care. He just wants to see his partner with a full belly. In that case, Henrietta asks for the supreme steak combo. Dennis jokes that it's the most expensive dish, but laughs it off and tells Atelier to close up for the night, now that their guest ordered the biggest meal. The two of them are going to have to eat it together. Just then, those two girls from the other day come back in order. A little while later, Dennis finishes Henrietta's supreme steak and brings another portion to Atelier, who's just as floored by the dish. The other customers ask why the chef wasn't open yesterday, so he explains he had a few things to take care of. Hearing this, Henrietta starts to get suspicious, picturing that same bag from the day before over Dennis' head, which fits just a little too perfectly. Right after, someone opens the restaurant door. With a smile, Chef Dennis welcomes the newest customer to the Adventurers restaurant. The next day, back at the restaurant, Henrietta tries to get the owner's attention to have a chat, but he's so focused on his work that he practically cuts her off, just to ask what she'll have today. After thinking for a bit, the knight orders the sorcery ramen. And only after she places her order does he show that he was, in fact, listening. Henrietta wanted to know if she should go back to hiding her gender in future adventures. The cook, our boy Dennis, tells it like it is. She should do things her own way, because that's the only way she'll ever be truly herself. Hearing those words, Henrietta rushes to the back of the restaurant and takes off all her armor. Before coming back out, she reflects that when people make mistakes, they start to fear making new ones and sometimes lose sight of who they really are. But, instead of giving in to that, the girl steps out in her true outfit, allowing herself to show her real self. Seeing this, Atelier, the waitress, gives her a thumbs up, and Dennis smiles in approval. Meanwhile, someone approaches the restaurant door. Inside, the warrior is savoring every bite of her noodles, her happiness written all over her face. After all, Dennis's advice had truly touched her heart. Words from a skilled chef just hit different. Speaking of which, Dennis suddenly changes his tone. Since she managed to eat everything in sight, he wants to know if she plans on joining another group and getting back to work. Henrietta tries to stall, so the chef gets straight to the point, pressing her about the tab she owes him. At that exact moment, a very young person walks in, takes a seat at the counter, and opens the menu. The owner greets the newcomer, though he has no idea if it's a boy, a girl, or maybe both. For her part, Henrietta can only think about how beautiful the child is, avoiding any pronouns. Dennis asks to be notified when the customer is ready to order, and the kid asks what's good to eat. Everything, Dennis replies, but the child thinks that's about the most useless answer possible. Unfazed, the chef suggests a vritra katsudon, but the kid isn't in the mood to down a bowl of rice. Henrietta suggests spakatsu, which is a pasta dish, but the child thinks that sounds too heavy. The warrior tries to offer something else, but this kid was cocky as hell. And Dennis, just like me, loses his patience and nearly snaps at the customer, forcing Henrietta to hold him back. Atelier, meanwhile, nudges the kid and says fried rice is the way to go in situations like this. With the choice made, Dennis gets to work with his usual cheerful flair, whipping up a meal with his signature magical touches. Soon, he serves up a gorgeous plate of shrimp fried rice. Without hesitation, the kid grabs a shrimp from the top and instantly falls in love with the taste. Afterwards, Dennis asks if there was something the kid wanted to talk about, since they walked in looking like someone who needed to vent. The boy confides that everyone around him is useless, mentally stunted, only ever thinking about finishing whatever quest is at hand and collecting a handout for payment. With zero ambition to become a top-tier group, that's what he hates the most. Those losers just pretending to be adventurers for show, which is unforgivable. The problem is, when the kids spoke this truth to their old group, they got kicked out. But he's real about it and says that's exactly what he wanted, because no way could he stay in a team of such shallow-minded people. Instead, one day he'll join the Silver Wing and become the greatest magic user there is. Not really in the mood for this conversation, especially since he used to be part of that crappy group. Dennis just tells the egotistical kid to tone it down a bit, or he'll risk ending up alone, because what makes a real adventurer is the group, not just individual talent. The mage agrees, as long as the group is strong enough to keep up. After chowing down, the kid pays and says he can keep the change even though he'd already paid the exact amount. Before leaving, he introduces himself as Vivia Strange, making it clear he'll be back for more of that fried rice. And wouldn't you know it, he's back the next day, waiting while the chef fries up some shrimp. This time, Vivia announces he's decided to join the area's strongest group, the Night Mist Troupe. After all, when you're as strong as Vivia, you end up being pretty populous. Dennis corrects him, saying the word is popular, and asks if the team is really up to Vivia's level. He's not sure, but he trusts in his own skills. Dennis notes that this kid really has some spirit. Soon the meal is served, and once again enchanted by the food, the short little mage wonders aloud if he'll get a cool nickname when he joins the Silver Wing, something like the Dark Mage. Dennis thinks to himself that it's more likely they'll call him Fried Rice Boy. But even if Vivia is egocentric, the chef admires his drive to get better. Dennis asks when his first job with the new team will be, and Vivia explains that tomorrow they'll be gathering rare materials on the 5th floor of the dungeon. Showing some concern, Dennis uses his scan ability and finds out Vivia is level 17, which is really high for someone his age, but the recommended level for entering the 5th floor is at least 30. With that in mind, Dennis asks if that's not a bit deep for him, but Vivia is sure it'll all work out, especially since the elite members will be supporting him. Hearing this, Dennis figures the kid probably read about advanced spells and now believes he can pull them off in a real battle. According to the chef, a person's level is basically a measure of the number and quality of the skills they've acquired. So, if Vivia really did master several advanced skills, it's strange that his level hasn't increased. With that in mind, Dennis tries to get the mage to see his own limits. But Vivia insists the chef could never understand what it's like to enter a dungeon, as it's a feeling only adventurers get. But our boy Dennis remembers all too well the last time he made it to the 37th floor. The next day, as Dennis is walking through the market with Atelier, he can't help but worry about Vivia. He even wants to stop the kid, but he knows that in the world of adventurers, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Suddenly, two passing adventurers start talking. One asks if that kid, Vivia, is going to be alright. The other shrugs it off, saying that's just how they do things and that Captain Hopper sent the kid to the 5th floor alone, just to see if he'd survive. It's a kind of rite of passage where most people end up dead. Hearing that, Dennis grabs both guys and drags them into an alley to get some answers. Thinking they're hotshots because they're members of the Night Mist Troupe, the two go on the attack, but Dennis absolutely wrecked those dudes without even breaking a sweat. He heads back to Atelier and sighs, saying they'll have to close the restaurant again today. She just nods and tells him to be careful, kind of understanding what's about to happen. The scene changes and we cut to Vivia, who's learning the hard way that real life is no walk in the park. He's running for his life, trying to shake off the monsters chasing him. But due to exhaustion and nerves, he ends up falling, and his foot gets caught in something that looks like a magically enchanted vine. Terrified, he tries to remember the spell to break enchantments, but he's so scared that his mind just blue screens. He thinks about how he read the books so carefully and all that, but life is like that, my friends. Training is one thing, but a real fight is another. As the goblins close in, he's already theorizing about how he's gonna bite the dust. But a spell reaches him, and when we see the goblins get to him, Vivia is no longer there, because a girl has hidden him in a hole in the wall. Vivia thanks her for the rescue and is impressed that she knows such an ancient spell. Even so, the girl makes it clear now's not the time to feel safe, they need to find a way out of there. Her name is Cynthia, and unfortunately, she was also abandoned by her group. She mentions that while they were running from monsters, she fell into a trap and no one came to save her. Vivia says that's horrible, but with those pompous speeches he was giving at the restaurant, it wouldn't be a stretch to think he'd agree with that kind of attitude. Cynthia says that no matter what she does, she feels like she was never even good enough for the basics. Vivia admits that he won't be rescued either and that maybe he was a little too arrogant. The two find comfort in their similar situations, and just like that, a bond forms between them. Faced with danger, Vivia comes up with a plan. He'll act as bait to draw the creatures away, giving Cynthia a chance to escape. Cynthia completely disagrees, but Vivia insists he wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for her. And for the first time in his life, Vivia Strange is ready to die for someone else. He spent his whole life being selfish, but Cynthia saved him and comforted him, and now, with all his heart, he just wants her to get out of this alive. So, the young mage gathers his courage and faces the goblins, casting his spell, Palm, which is literally a giant hand that acts as a barrier. But the goblins manage to force their way through and finally surround him. And just then, for the citizens' luck, Dennis comes crashing down from above, smashing the goblins. With a giant frying pan he's summoned with a spell called Steel. Thinking it's another monster, Vivia starts firing off a bunch of palms. But when he hears the monster's voice, he realizes it's just the chef. Dennis pulls off the bag from his head, smacks Vivia for doing something so reckless, and tells him it's time to go. Vivia runs to find the friend he made in the dungeon, but when they get to the hole in the wall, they discover that Cynthia was, in fact, just a skeleton wearing the girl's clothes the whole time. Holy crap, man, not even the future saw that one coming. I was shocked. The next day, at the Adventurers Guild, Vivia and Dennis find out the girl's name was Cynthia Dread, a 16-year-old mage who got separated from her party on the 5th floor of the dungeon 13 years ago. I had to swallow hard at that reveal. I felt bad for the girl. They then visit the Adventurers' cemetery to pay their respects. Dennis mentions he's heard stories like this before, where the spirits of adventurers who died in labyrinths sometimes help people who get trapped there. As they placed flowers on the tombstone, Vivia breaks down in tears and promises he'll always come back to visit his friend and that he'll become the #1 mage in the world to save people like Cynthia. As they're leaving the cemetery, Dennis tries to cheer him up, promising to make him a big plate of fried rice, but Vivia is still visibly shaken. So the chef gives him a hard slap on the back and tells him not to stay down for too long, or Cynthia's spirit will never be free. Annoyed, Vivia says he already knows that, but he just wanted to let himself be sad, at least for a little while. Suddenly, he feels the girl's same magical current flow through him once again. He thinks to himself that, in the old days, whenever people experienced something mysterious, they called it magic, and if that was true, then Cynthia Dread was certainly a mage. Meanwhile, at the city's bell tower, a girl stood at the edge about to jump, wondering, why did things have to end up like this? We start with a flashback, where we see someone calling out for Backhell, wanting to know when she'd finally fix the reports she was supposed to turn in. Head down, the poor girl just mutters an apology, but of course, that wasn't enough for him. Meanwhile, the other guys in the room just laugh and make fun of her, as the girl tries to explain that the numbers for the mission reward payouts don't add up. Hearing this, her boss smacks her on the head with the stack of papers and tells her she'd better redo everything until the numbers match, doubting that she's really level 32 at all. Because of that scolding, Bakhel is stuck at work long after everyone else has left, trying to sort out the mess. She notices that the number of collected items is off, which is why the reward calculations don't match up. In her mind, it had to be someone who'd been there longer making these mistakes, but she was still the one stuck fixing them. And to top it all off, she had to get up at 3 in the morning for a dawn mission, and she hadn't had a bite to eat all day. In other words, she was screwed. Even though she doubted any restaurants would still be open, her hunger was so intense that she decided to take a chance and check if a new place she'd heard about might still be serving. When she gets there, Atelier was just packing things up to close, and for a second, Bachel's hopes went down the drain. But then the girl asks if she's a customer, giving her a chance to slip in at the last minute. After that, Atelier asks Dennis to take care of one more customer. The cook just looks on intently, while Henrietta and Vivia mention that it's rare to see Atelier ask for anything. Embarrassed, Bakhel sits at the counter and, after glancing at the menu, orders the daily special. While Vivia is talking to Henrietta about cutting her bangs, which she mentions she didn't even notice, Bakhel finds herself soaking in the cozy atmosphere of the place, which makes her heart feel lighter. The truth is, she usually spent her rare days off sleeping with no friends to hang out with, and she realized it'd be nice to come to a warm place like this more often. After a while, Dennis brings out the special, and the new customer stares at the fried food and the unfamiliar sauce. She'd never seen anything like it. The moment she tastes it, her jaw drops at what the chef can do, because she'd never eaten anything so delicious in her entire life. Agreeing that this place was a real gem, Henrietta lists off another 15 dishes for her to try. Vivia jokes that his friend has already tried everything there, to which she replies, "Well, what else do you expect from the restaurant's first customer?" Our boy Dennis questions if she means the first freeloader, mentioning that while he gave her an inch, she went nuts and took a whole mile. Henrietta grumbles that Vivia is also unemployed, but the chef points out that the mage at least pays for his meals with his savings, earning him the title of traitor from Henrietta. With that, Bakhel bursts into a laugh so hard that she starts to cry, and everyone turns to look at her. She apologizes for it, while thinking to herself that a place in the world filled with good food and good people really does exist. But every day, she was trapped in a true hell disguised as a job, where everyone hated her for no reason and she had to work late into the night. She reflects that she wakes up every morning wishing she could just disappear, though it hadn't always been that way. Man, I feel so bad for this girl. This moment was genuinely sad. We then get a flashback that shows her past. When she was younger, people saw her as a promising mage, praised by everyone in her community. She was so talented that when she came of age, the whole village pooled their resources to sponsor her studies in the big city. Things started off well, and Bakhel skipped a grade because of her remarkable abilities. She was even offered a position as a teacher. She was brimming with confidence and even joined the city's strongest adventurer group to earn money and give back to those who had supported her. With that memory in her mind, she leaves the restaurant after only a single bite. Everyone inside worries about her, and Vivia mentions that she's part of the Night Mist troupe, the same group that once left him for dead. The others quickly urge Dennis to do something, but the chef just shrugs, saying he's just a cook and all he could do was feed people. Bakhel, it seemed, would have to help herself. The scene changes, and at 3 in the morning her alarm goes off. Though she hadn't managed to sleep at all, exhausted, she dozes off for just a moment and ends up running late. In a rush, she grabs her things and hurries to meet her teammates, who are furious about her lack of responsibility. Even so, they set out for the mission. In the chaos, they're ambushed by a werewolf that knocks one of the team members to the ground. Bakhel reacts instantly with a blast, taking down the monster. Worried, she rushes to check on her injured teammate, only to be shoved aside by the very man she just saved. After the mission, the young mage wanders through the city streets, weighed down by sadness. Her teammates had the audacity to blame her for what happened in the dungeon and said horrible things to her. Nearby, Henrietta and Vivia are walking, talking about food. They then spot Bakhel, head down as she passes. As the scene evolves, we see that it connects to the end of the previous episode, where Bakhel is at the top of the bell tower, standing at the edge, wondering how her life came to this. Vivia and Henrietta had followed her, realizing things were much worse than they thought. And just as the bell begins to ring, Bakhel jumps. Henrietta leaps after her, grabbing the girl, while Vivia casts a cushioning spell near the ground, turning their fall into a soft landing. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Atelier steps out of the bath and immediately complains there aren't any towels. Which means, of course, she walks out dripping wet and completely naked, leaving Dennis scrambling, desperate to find anything for the little girl to dry herself off with. Moments later, Vivia and Henrietta show up with Bakhel. Our protag takes one look at the situation and comes to a conclusion. The little mage is dealing with an illness of the mind. Vivia can't help but jab that Henrietta will never suffer from anything like that. When he sees the girl laugh, Dennis realizes just how well those two troublemakers are already getting along. Henrietta wants to know how Bakhel can be cured, and the chef explains the only real remedy is plenty of rest. Vivia isn't convinced that'll ever happen. After all, Bakhel is part of the Night Mist squad. And so, Dennis promises to have a talk with the crew. That night, he welcomes the squad's members into his restaurant. Their disgusting leader, Captain Hopper, is quick to apologize that one of his members is causing so much trouble. Dennis, for his part, insists he's the one who should be apologizing, since he knocked a few of them out. Hopper ignores him, saying he heard the food here is top-notch. Dennis can tell this guy isn't giving an inch and quickly sizes him up, level 51, way out of the league of any average adventurer. No wonder his squad is #1 in the city. As for Bakhel, Dennis explains she's safe and resting, but she's in no condition to work and should be released from the group. Hopper says that's easier said than done. After all, they have custody of the girl. With that, another member tosses Bachel's contract onto the table. Dennis is furious when he sees what she signed up for: impossible conditions and an inhuman workload, especially for someone her age. When the others mock his concern, the chef loses his cool and says flat out they're nothing but a gang of cruel con artists. Hearing that, Hopper crushes his mug in his hand and says this city is their turf, and they are the law around here. If the cook doesn't want trouble, he'd better hand Bakhel over. At the same time, Bakhel wakes up feeling miserable, wondering why her friends didn't just let her die. Atelier calmly tells her she's free to die if that's what she wants. After all, she herself had thought about ending her life once, after everything she'd lost. She'd been banished and sold as a slave, and that's when the dark thoughts started. But she didn't bite the dust because, somehow, there were still wonderful things in life. First things first, she tells her friend, have something delicious to eat, and only then decide what you really want. If you still want to die after that, then maybe there's nothing else to be done. Either way, Atelier will respect her choice, though she'd much rather her friend choose to live. Outside the room, Dennis asks Hopper if he thinks he's the king or something. Hopper shrugs, saying it's pretty much like that. After all, in every dungeon city, the strongest group holds the real power, and the Silverwing group is a perfect example. Dennis points out that Hopper's bunch is nothing like them, but Hopper disagrees. Just then, Katie, also known as the Crimson Lightning, bursts in, looking very happy to see her teammate again. Dennis tries to get her to come back later, but she pouts, saying she came all this way just to see him. Hopper can't help but notice the crimson armor, the red swords, and the fiery hair, not to mention the insignia on her coat. And that's when it hits the bastard. He's looking at the vice captain of Silverwing, better known as the Crimson Swiftblade. At that instant, Hopper starts getting seriously nervous about how close Katie and Dennis seem. After Dennis convinces her to wait a bit, he asks if there's a way to get the girl out of the squad without causing a scene. Katie immediately interrupts again, scooping Vivia up for a hug like he's a stuffed animal. Dennis has to remind her that he's a guy, while the young mage asks how she knows the chef. She cheerfully reveals that Dennis used to be part of Silverwing, and that the two of them were basically partners. A revelation that hits the entire restaurant like a bombshell, leaving everyone stunned. Hopper's eyes go wide when he realizes where Dennis came from. He finally understands that making an enemy out of this guy is a terrible idea. With that in mind, he orders a subordinate to burn Bachel's contract, officially releasing her from the squad, and then storms out of the place, fuming. Katie remarks that things could have gotten ugly. After all, she's furious that someone messed with her Dennis. He mentions that he doesn't remember ever belonging to her. Full of anger, she asks if he wants her to kick that idiot out of town, and Dennis knows she has the power to do it, but tells her to calm down. Leaving all that aside, the chef asks his old friend what she wants to eat. At that exact moment, Atelier shows up to order the daily special for Backhel, who's finally out of bed. Dennis smiles as Atelier pulls out a chair for the girl, and Katie orders the same dish for herself. Once the food is ready, both of them get their meals. Katie dives right in, no hesitation, and shows Backhel that eating can, in fact, save a life. Then, after Dennis reminds her that she's still there, the girl snaps out of it and tries the house's signature fried shrimp with the special sauce. Her reaction: it's like she died and went to heaven, only to come back after tasting something so incredible. And from that moment on, she just couldn't stop eating, savoring every bite with pure delight. After her trip, Katie arrives at her group's base, where her teammates are gossiping about Captain Vigo's foul mood and how the squad's missions have been going from bad to worse lately. Lost in thought, she accidentally bumps right into the captain himself. Vigo shoots a death glare at the gossiping pair and sends them off on the day's mission, then turns to Katie, mentioning he heard she went to see Dennis. She explained she was missing her friend's cooking and that when she tasted last night's dish, she was so happy that she invited our protagonist to come back to Silverwing. According to her, the whole group has been on the verge of collapse since he left, but Dennis obviously isn't interested and consequently won't be coming back. Katie, persistent, continues, saying he was the backbone of the support team, and now that he's gone, the members who relied on him are getting more and more irritated with Vigo, who's done nothing to fill the gap. However, our dear Dennis couldn't care less about that and just says that's water under the bridge, and because of that, he's not going back and is very happy with his current life. Sure, his customers might be a bit unhinged and even not pay their bills sometimes, right, Henrietta? But he's happy, he likes the restaurant, and he's not planning on returning to that stressful team anytime soon. In the end, Dennis makes it clear he's a cook, not an adventurer. One way or another, Vigo also makes it clear that he doesn't want Dennis back on the team and orders Katie to stay away from him. Upset, she can't understand how things got to this point, but the captain doesn't say another word and ends the conversation right then and there. Meanwhile, Dennis's restaurant is absolutely packed. Customers are crowding in, putting his cooking speed to the test. At the same time, Atelier proves she's not slacking off, jotting down every order while dashing back and forth. Vivia comments that the restaurant is finally thriving, and Henrietta agrees it's hard to resist the chef's food. Suddenly, the mage is served by Backhel and is surprised to see her working there. From now on, she's going to live and help out at the restaurant, and she shows all her gratitude to her friends for always stopping by when she wasn't feeling well. Vivia is happy for her but points out that she shouldn't push herself so hard. Embarrassed, she admits she only feels at ease when she's working. Besides, her mini-senpai Atelier is always by her side, come what may. Dennis shows up and says the two of them make a great team, which Henrietta agrees with. He then serves up the grub for the duo, and as soon as they take a bite, the reaction is exactly what you'd expect. They worship those shrimp as if they were gods. Henrietta perfectly understands why the restaurant is so packed now and is even proud to be a regular customer. But our protag corrects her, saying she's not a regular customer, but a freeloader, killing her vibe on the spot. Vivia is shocked to realize his friend still hasn't paid the chef. She tries every excuse, explaining how hard it's been to find a job, but anyway, the chef gives her a threatening look and makes it clear that if she keeps dodging the bill, things are going to get heated. Vivia tries to change the subject, pointing out how many customers there are and asking if it's tough to serve everyone at once. Dennis praises Atelier for keeping everything running smoothly. Dennis then freezes and drops a bowl on the floor. Vivia asks if he's okay. Our protagonist just replies with a question, asking if he can stop by the restaurant on his next day off, because he needs some advice. Henrietta jumps in, offering her own advice, but he cuts her off immediately. Without understanding what's going on, Vivia agrees to the invitation. On the other hand, we see that Henrietta is going through some tough times. Besides being out of a job and broke, she also has to take cold showers because she doesn't have money to pay for hot water. She thinks to herself that she needs to get some money to pay Dennis and starts to wonder if the advice Vivia wants is about banning her, mentioning that she needs to do something urgently. The scene changes once more, and now we're on the day off, where Vivia goes to the restaurant and hears from Dennis that Atelier seems to have a boyfriend. Completely freaking out, he explains that he started giving her an allowance recently, and after that, she's been going out all the time. He just can't handle the idea that she might be involved with some random guy. And to make matters worse, Dennis confides, in a panic, that he saw her with a boy and is now pounding the table, demanding to know if that kid is his adopted daughter's boyfriend. Vivia tries to calm him down, suggesting he just ask her instead of overthinking it, but the reality is, Dennis can't bring himself to talk about it. And completely freaking out, he just says that the least the kid could do is show up and give his father-in-law a box of sweets or something. And since he didn't do that, it proves he's weak and shallow. And if that's the case, Dennis won't accept it, because he'll only accept the guy if he's level 80 or higher. At that exact moment, Atelier comes in, asking what they're talking about, and Dennis almost falls over from panic. Vivia, showing a bit more maturity, tries to play it off, saying they were just chatting about cooking. The little girl gets excited and says she wants to learn too. To keep up the act, Dennis tells her to wash her hands and get ready to start learning. Once that's done, he brings them to the counter to teach them the right way to cut onions. Their eyes start to water, and even though Vivia is also suffering a lot, the chef's attention is entirely on the girl, which the mage notices is completely disproportional treatment. As the cook watches the girl cutting onions, he remembers the day he learned to cut onions from his mom. On that occasion, she noticed he was secretly using a skill to keep his eyes from burning, something his mom found out because she always knew everything he did. Brought back to reality by the girl, Dennis realizes she's dropped eggshells into the bowl and then helps her do it the right way. As things unfold, we see the three of them sharing this team moment, even strengthening their bonds, until finally, the dish is ready. At that moment, the cook praises Atelier for her achievement. On the other side, the poor Vivia holds his plate like a trophy and brags about his own skills, only to get annoyed when he realizes the chef only has eyes for his pseudo-daughter. At that exact moment, the city bell rings, and without missing a second, Atelier slips out of the restaurant, saying she's going for a walk but dodging any specific questions. Just then, Backhel wakes up, so Dennis tells her to eat the 2 katsudons that are ready. Vivia reminds everyone that one of them is his, but Dennis cuts him off and hands Backhel the shopping list. Confused, she asks if Dennis isn't going with her, but he explains that he and Vivia have a little something to take care of right now. Then, Henrietta bursts into the restaurant to announce she's passed a test to join an adventurer group, but the chef interrupts her mid-sentence and asks if she'd like to go shopping with Backhel. Eager to prove she can be useful, she says yes on the spot, and with that, Dennis bolts out the door, dragging Vivia along with him. At the market, the chef and the mage spot Atelier saying goodbye to an old lady. Vivia grumbles that they shouldn't be stalking the girl like this, but the cook shrugs it off. After all, he's her protector. But if that's really the case, Vivia asks why he doesn't just go talk to his daughter. Dennis admits he can't, so the mage declares that he's acting like a stalker. Ignoring the young man's words, he turns the kid's head towards Atelier and points out the last thing he wanted to see: his adopted daughter chatting with a boy at a market stall. Dennis is about to explode, while Vivia points out that he doesn't even know if that boy is her boyfriend. Still ignoring his friend, Dennis keeps a close eye as Atelier is led by the boy into a jewelry store. Now Dennis is really freaking out, convinced she's going to buy a wedding ring. And amidst the chaos, Vivia has an idea. After their errands, Backhel notices her friend looks worried. Henrietta says she can't stop thinking about her debt to the chef. Backhel doesn't understand why the adventurer can't save any money. Henrietta explains that, besides equipment maintenance, she's always getting hurt and spending money on potions. Now that money is tight, she really wants to find a way to repay Dennis. Backhel, in turn, praises her friend's character for caring so much and is rewarded with a sincere hug. At that moment, the girls overhear 2 men gossiping about the captain of the Night Mist troop. According to the rumors, the guy was humiliated by a restaurant manager who, as it turns out, is a former Silverwing. In the end, the 2 hope that Scum doesn't try to seek revenge. Hearing this, Bakhel and Henrietta exchange a tense glance. Meanwhile, Vivia borrows a megaphone from a nearby shop. But it's not just any megaphone, it's a magical item. With this in hand, the duo manages to sneak close to a jewelry store window to eavesdrop on what Atelier is saying. The first thing they hear her say is, "It's beautiful. I love it. A treasure for life. Atelier was so happy to have met you." Naturally, Dennis completely loses his mind hearing this and has a meltdown right there in the street. And while that's happening, a woman's purse is stolen by a thief using wind magic. So, Dennis quickly pulls himself together to see what happened. Meanwhile, the thief is gloating about how easily he took the old lady's money, but he's not prepared for a man sprinting toward him at full speed with a child slung over his shoulder. The thief is level 30 and thinks that's more than enough to shake off this nuisance, but quickly realizes he's in trouble when he sees his pursuer keeping up without even using magic. Trying to get away, he uses his wind magic to leap over rooftops, trying to ditch Dennis. But our protagonist simply powers through, copying the thief's path and blocking his escape. Even so, he admits that a little magic would come in handy, so Vivia casts the only spell he knows, the palm, which creates a hand-shaped trampoline, allowing the cook to boost his speed even more, to the terror of the child hanging on. Still, Vivia manages to keep casting palms, keeping the wild chase going at full throttle. At one point, Dennis almost catches the fugitive, but the guy was skilled and managed to escape. To make matters worse, he even had the audacity to taunt the chef. And that's when Dennis takes it personally and gets back to the chase. And as they're literally flying through the market, they spot Henrietta and Bakhel, and they end up bumping into the thief. Well, that seals his fate, because she goes up to him and uses a move called Grosse La Dance. And that's more than enough to capture the fugitive. After that, the warrior sees Dennis arrive, and he thanks her for her help, saying she's the best. And obviously, that ends up being the best reward she could have hoped for. After all that chaos, the chef takes the girls back to the restaurant to gossip about Atelier. Dennis thinks she's dating, and Vivia replies that they're still not sure about that. Henrietta asks if this makes our boy Dennis feel lonely, but he says that's not the issue. When the girl realizes the cook's whole agitation was because of that, she's relieved, as she thought he was furious with her and would kick her out of the restaurant. And Dennis just replies by asking how he could kick out someone who eats everything with as much pleasure as she does. Well, for now, at least. And the girl almost turned purple with fear from that threat. Just then, Atelier finally returns, and the entire restaurant goes quiet. She crosses the room and hands a gift to Dennis, saying she saved up to buy this jewel and asked for someone's help to buy it because it's the same color as his eyes. My God, look at that plot twist. Dennis is obviously over the moon, but when Henrietta almost blurts out that he was following the girl, Dennis threatens to ban her from the restaurant for real this time. Atelier then asks him to put on the bracelet. He does and suddenly feels like the happiest man in the world. Atelier's eyes shine with happiness, and I confess, mine did too. After that, she grabs onto his pant leg in a gesture full of love. Meanwhile, the scene changes, and to end our joy, we see that the bastard Vigo is going to a mansion to reunite with someone he hasn't seen in a long time. And it's with this mysterious scene that the episode ends. And now, will this somehow end our protagonist's piece? If you want the continuation, you know what to do. Let me know in the comments that you want the next part, smash that like and hype button to support the video, and subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss any new parts.